Introducing the AH-64E Apache Guardian, one of the most terrifying helicopters the world has ever known. One that terrified the enemy every time the name was echoing through the horizon. In the early stages of the production, the AH-64 was a basic but an impressive helicopter. As time went on, the modern weapons of war always had to be pushed to their absolute limits, and the Apache was no exception either. Eventually, the AH-64D came out and replaced its previous variant, the AH-64A. This model included upgraded engines, digital avionics, a new and improved longbow radar and optical systems, and most importantly, brand new Hellfire missiles. The Apache was so much ahead of its time that it was kept in service for many years until it was time for another batch of upgrades. As time went on, the digital agent technology became extremely sophisticated, and with it, the Apache had to keep the pace going. An all-around improved avionics, fully digitalized equipment, upgraded longbow radar, extra countermeasures like chaffs and flares, and the compatibility to use the most recent and brand new missiles, the JAGM-179 Joint Air-to-Ground Missile, and finally a brand new infrared countermeasure system. This version of the AH-64 is the most modern Apache we can get in the game, unless they add in the one with the electronic Burj Khalifa on top. This was the general history of the AH-64E Apache Guardian. Now let's get on with the armors and modules. Welcome to the Armor and Modular Protection Analysis, where we basically analyze the armors and modules inside of a vehicle. Today's aircraft is the AH-64E Apache Guardian. Now the first thing we need to take a look at is the crew. This helicopter has a pilot and a gunner sitting in a tandem seat configuration. The crew has CCIP on all of its weapons, including an EEGS for the gun, a fully equipped missile approach warning system alongside a very powerful IRCM with 90 countermeasures, a laser warning receiver, night vision and thermals alongside a very good optical system, helmet-mounted sight, a solid radar warning receiver, and a multi-millimeter wave new generation longbow radar. This helicopter has two self-sealing fuel tanks with neutral gas pressurization system with polyurethane filling situated at the center of the helicopter with these fuel presets. The fuel presets on this helicopter are generally normal and you don't have a lot of differences compared to the previous variants. Although on the A variant you did not have the polyurethane filling. And even if you're set on fire, I'm sure that the fire extinguisher will be your good friend, since this helicopter does in fact have a fire extinguisher. This helicopter has two General Electric T700-GE-701D engines that are a bit of an upgrade compared to the previous variants. With a staggering 95 extra horsepower per engine, I think this helicopter is going to break the Mach barrier almost twice as fast. Oh wait, hold on, did you actually subscribe to the channel? Well, you better do it, if not I'm gonna send 16 Hellfire missiles at your position. At the end, you have the oil cooling systems, transmissions, traction of the control surfaces, and oh my god, there are plenty of modules to talk about over here. So it's been a while since I've made a video on the Apaches, right? Yeah, ever since JAGM improved the internal modules on helicopters, for some reason, as soon as I make a video about them, their modules get instantly upgraded. Prime example? Mi-35. I swear to god, 15 minutes before me releasing the video, JAGM not only announces two new variants of the Mi-35, but also updates the modules as well, making this entire video totally pointless and outdated. Thank you so much, JAGM. Very goddamn cool. So let me simplify all these modules for you really quick. Each one of these have a designated role. If one of these modules get damaged, some of your helicopter's abilities will be disabled. These two are responsible for your targeting optics. The flight controls for the pilot and the gunner are responsible for the MFD/HUD and guidance weapons control respectively. These two on the left and right of the gunner are responsible for the guidance weapons control and the weapons control itself. The ones that are between the fuel tanks are all responsible for the night vision, MFDs, and HUDs. You have the absolutely incredible IRCM blocks on each of the wingtips. You have the Bushmaster in between the fuel tanks, and you have the auxiliary power unit, which is currently useless in the game. You have the sensor avionics blocks behind the fuel tanks, and at the end you have the furthest avionics block for the radar warning receiver. Also, for some reason, every single one of these modules are heavily detailed as well. And finally, the longbow radar itself. This radar is a brand new variation, and it has twice the range of the previous radar seen on the Block 10 Delta Apache. This was all the modules on this helicopter. Now let's get on with the offensive armaments. Let's start with a 2.75-inch Hydra rocket, 4 installed on all pylons, 19 rockets per pod, giving you 76 total. The Hydras are generally standard rockets that you can use to take down the enemy during your rocket rush. The explosive mass is standard, the speed and the range are very nice, and the penetration is quite decent. This rocket is really standard, however, at this battle rating, I would personally recommend you to only use them when you have to. Say for example if you have no other choice. In that case, another missile will also appear in the background as well. The AIM-92 Stingers, 1 installed on the outer pylons, 2 per pod, giving you 4 stingers total. The ATAS missiles are generally your stereotypical common manpad. They have a very good range, serviceable maneuverability, and it has decent flare resistance. However, it does not have any proxy fuse, and most importantly, the original pylons that it was supposed to be installed on are now occupied by the infrared countermeasures, which I will talk about soon. This forces the Stinger to be installed on the main ground attack pylons, which, depending on your mission objective and your unlocked armaments, you can mount 2 of them in exchange for 4 missiles. It all depends on you whether if it's worth it or not, but I would personally not bother with the Stingers anyways, as we will have more powerful weapons, which I will talk about fairly soon. Speaking of powerful weapons, we have the AGM-114K Hellfire 2 missiles. Whoa. Okay, so before I talk about these missiles, I have to introduce you to the APKWS II laser-guided rockets, installed on all pylons, 7 rockets per pod, giving you 28 total. You have 2 types of guided rockets that have different warheads. You have the M282 and the M151. The M282 is a SAP-HE warhead with low amount of explosive mass, but it has higher penetration than the M151. Speaking of the M151, this rocket has a good explosive mass, but the penetration is just outright insulting. These guided rockets have a short booster and a limited secret FOV and are heavily reliant on their trajectory and aiming. Do not get fooled by its long range. If you can't aim these guys right, it barely even reaches 5 kilometers. Personally, I would use them against low armored targets, and they're incredibly situational as well, so for that reason, I wouldn't really recommend them. Alright, sorry, my bad, continue. Speaking of powerful weapons, we have the AGM-114K Hellfire 2 missiles, 1 installed on each pylons, 2 or 4 per pod, giving you 8 or 16 missiles total. The Hellfire missiles became an icon with the Apache. It is a very good missile, but it does have its own limitations. First of all, you have 9 kilograms of explosive mass, which is amazing, incredible tandem warhead penetration with relatively decent speed, and overall a very good quantity of missiles as well. However, as we said, this missile is not without its problems. First of all, it has a top attack flight path. Now let me explain this to you in Microsoft Paint. In reality, it's supposed to go up and engage the enemy vehicles at a straight angle, which helps you damage and penetrate the enemy vehicles a lot better. In War Thunder, it lofts into the atmosphere, then goes down and engages at this angle. Now imagine if I had a Vickers missile and I fired it. Look at my trajectory. Do you see how flat this is compared to the Hellfire? Now you can finally understand why the hell I was extremely pissed off when I was making the Comanche video. Wasting my missile's energy and my goddamn time! And of course, this missile also has one major problem. If it has any kind of smokescreen or a tree between it, it will simply lose the track and shoots itself, then goes anywhere but the place you're pointing at. This should be applied for all the guided munitions that you have on this helicopter, but I kind of feel like on the Hellfires and the laser-guided JAGMs, it is a lot more critical than usual. And speaking of the JAGM missile, you have the AGM-179 Medium-Range Joint Air-to-Ground Missile. Both laser-guided and fire-and-forget versions, 1 pod installed on all pylons, 4 per pod, giving you 16 missiles total. These guys are just simply ridiculous. Looking at their statistics already feels like a fever dream than anything else. Let's start with comparing this to the Hellfire missiles. Yes, you lose half of your explosive mass and quite a bit of speed, however, having the ability to be a fire-and-forget missile already is something. Not to mention that the range of this missile is twice as much as the Hellfire itself. This gives it quite a bit of edge when it comes to engaging the enemy anti-airs or multi-engaging the ground vehicles in general. There are 2 other helicopters as well, which I'm making a video on. Don't worry guys, I'm gonna start work on them as soon as I release this video. Sure, it does not have GNSS or it doesn't have a lot of explosive mass, but currently this is the fastest fire-and-forget missile we have. Of course, we have a Persian poem that always says, "That sun has no mountain from her death symbol." This basically means that there are some things that are inherited from its predecessor. For example, this missile relies on an infrared lock, and if you lose it against a tree or smoke grenades, the missile pretty much shits itself and malfunctions. Now, the GNSS would have been more useful in this situation, as it would override the infrared lock for a while until it regained it again. And also, here's a harsh truth about the fire-and-forget missiles. You generally cannot really guide them to a specific location, even though you absolutely could do it with this version of the JAGMs, which makes this goddamn thing pointless. Oh, sorry, I was interrupting something? Okay, my bad. Anyway, continue. The fire-and-forget missiles look for a specific heat signature within a square, and whatever it finds, it will go dead center into the target. This means 2 things. 1, you might have a lot of hard time when trying to engage the enemy target in between plenty of tank corpses, as the missiles tends to lock on the hotter tanks in more denser areas. And 2, you can't fire on specific weak spots of tanks, making them harder to one-shot the enemy. Well, in that case, you also have the ability to pick up the semi-active laser-guided variants of the JAGM missile as well. But now another question comes up. Since we're going back to the laser-guided munitions, which one is better, the JAGM missile or the Hellfire 2s? I personally have to say it totally depends on you. Would you rather have twice the explosive mass and better speed, or would you rather have a slower, less punchier missile but with double the range and proper lofting? For me personally, I love both of them, and I think they can be effective in different situations. Okay, who am I lying to? I only use the fire and forget missiles, everything else is just outright bullshit. And finally, you have the 30mm Bushmaster with 1200 rounds of ammunition. The Bushmaster has pretty much become an icon for the AH-64 Apache, a cannon that does not have tracers, with rounds that will penetrate very well, and if they don't, they will splash on impact, making it a relatively dangerous cannon. However, do not expect it to penetrate heavily armored vehicles, just simply going above their roof is going to suffice. This was all the armaments. Oh wait, I almost forgot to talk about this guy. These are the IRCM blocks. For the longest time, the Russians had the monopoly on having the best IRCMs a helicopter ever carried, more notably the Mi-28NM. Ka-52 also had that, but that one is limited against spike missiles, plus it doesn't have the Lemur missiles, so nobody cares about my homie for now. Eventually, the Chinese got the brand new Z-10 helicopter with a very capable and competent IRCM. The US has finally joined the club by having one of the best helicopter IRCMs in the entire game, and oh my god, what an IRCM. Unpopular opinion, but if you have this block, you might as well remove all your flares and replace them with chaffs. I know these guys can be destroyed, but let's be honest, how many times you had specific modules in mind that were broken on a helicopter? And two, how many times chaffs and flares were ever useful on the battlefield? Because every time I use them, I always get shafted in the face anyway. Outside of that, if you want to carry out flares on this thing, feel free to do so. But this is how I would personally play it. Now let's get on with the flight performance. Fun fact, when I was making a video on the Apache 2 years ago, I totally forgot to talk about its flight performance. Oh wait, did I interrupt something again? Okay, my bad. When it comes to its flight performance, this helicopter is a joy to fly with. Don't let the extra 100 horsepower per engine fool you. As far as I've played the Guardian, it only felt 2 or 3% better than the D variant. Overall, majority of the Apaches feel incredibly nice. The maximum speed is very good, and if you want to do a sharp turn with it, it does not disappoint you when it comes to the collective pitch management. The Apache is one of those helicopters that can also operate with a single engine. The maneuverability overall is great as well, which also gives you the edge that you need when it comes to sharp turns into the targets. The pitch control is very good, the yaw control feels very comfortable, and the roll rate is very pleasant to work with. Now let's get on with the modules research. Welcome to the Modules Research Priority, where we basically provide our knowledge and share our experiences with you so you can see which modules are the best to grind first. Alright, before I start anything, Gaijin, why the hell did you decide that taking 2 guidance systems on the same missile and making them 2 separate modules was a good idea? With the fire and forget one having the cost of 49,000 RP? Gaijin, are you out of your goddamn mind? Keep it professional. Anyway, since your Apache has a very good flight performance even when it's stuck, I would highly recommend you to either grind the MAW first or the cannon if you use it quite a lot, as the cannon will be a lot harder to overheat once you research the module. After that, go for the Hellfires, then go for the laser-guided JAGMs, and then go for the thermals, or if you want to also shoot down aerial targets, you can also pick up the Stingers or the EFS. And then finally, get the fire and forget JAGMs with 49k arc. It pisses me off. And the rest, grind it however you please. Now let's get on with the Heli PvE. When it comes to Heli PvE, this helicopter is a meta changer. The fire and forget missiles gives it the extra edge to be as competitive as possible, both with regards to its quantity and quality of missiles. However, you're not the only one with these types of missiles. The more we go forward, the more fire and forget missiles we will see on the battlefield. And since Gaijin is too lazy to add 2 lines of code that spawns more targets for the players, preventing the faster players to hoard out all the kills, you have to compensate with your sharpness and skill. Even though I highly doubt pointing and clicking is going to be anything but skill, let's have a look at all these 5 objectives and see this helicopter can perform. Destroying the enemy assaults and defenses is something that you can also do. However, I will give you some caution just so you can be aware about them. You see, this missile still has some minor problems that will become a little bit annoying when it comes to its seeker. First of all, firing at long-range targets is reliable. However, if you have anything between the missile and the target, say for example a tree or a bush, expect to bash the hell out of that lock key until you get a solid tone or a normal square. In longer ranges, the enemy anti-tank guns will be a lot harder to lock and fire upon, and since it does not have GNSS, it will be a little bit problematic the more you go forward. So make sure to use them wisely and effectively. Destroying the enemy bombers and attackers is laughably easy. As your JAGMs are so reliable and so maneuverable, you can pretty much ditch out the AIM-92 Stingers. I would personally recommend them to fire these missiles within 10 kilometers of range, as the JAGM's burner will stop once it hits the 10-kilometer radius. Then after that, expect 2 different scenarios. Either watch the enemy planes die like wet piss one by one, or watch your kills get stolen. Destroying the enemy bases can be nice if you work it right. Let's be fair, as soon as you unlock the fire and forget missiles, you're probably not gonna touch the Hellfires in this game mode. Firing these missiles into the bases can be a little bit time-consuming and awkward to say the least. So I would recommend you to carry out your Hellfires if you want to destroy the enemy bases. As for destroying the enemy convoys, this thing can also do the job incredibly well. However, watch out for two things. If the enemy convoy is cluttered, you might fire 2 or 3 missiles into one target due to the cluster the Gaijin has created. So I would suggest you to pick up at least 4 laser-guided missiles for precise firing. Landing and capturing the enemy base is going to be just as easy as you would expect. If you know how to land this helicopter fast and quick, you can shine brighter than the Stora on the T-90. Uy, bля. Overall, you are one of the best helicopters in this game mode. But is this the same case in ground realistic? Well, let's have a look at that. When it comes to ground realistic, this helicopter sits at a sweet spot of 12.3. You're pretty much at the end of the line for all your vehicles and you're compatible with any top tier you play with. F-18s and F-15s, check. Most modern Abrams and HSTVL, check. Class system, check. But let's be honest, this is how you would see it in your dream, and I'm pretty sure that most of you people have lineups that are basically similar to this show that I have. God, maybe even worse. But here's the main question: how do we play this thing in ground realistic? Well, the first method is gonna be rocket rushing, which, let's be honest, it's such an old school method. If you want to make it work, good for you. But I personally would go for ATGM firing. The second method is to use the Stingers to fire at the enemy aircraft, which can do the job, but I kind of feel like you're wasting your time with it. And finally, you can use your ATGM so you can push this helicopter to its absolute limit. Now this is where I would simply go towards the final verdict, but there are several things that I have to mention before wrapping everything up. The way that this missile is implemented is that it's best to be used against tanks. Don't get me wrong, you can use it against modern anti-air, but those guys are so big that you might damage its modules, but not the crew members. This is something that the Lemurs or the CM502s can easily do without any kind of problems because their explosive mass is more than enough. Now allow me to explain about the IRCM on this thing and what happens when you're against your arch nemesis, which is this guy. Oh, sorry, my bad, I mean this guy. First of all, your infrared countermeasure protects you against various IR-guided munitions, such as Fox 2s, infrared SAM systems, Spike LR from the ground, and fire and forget helicopter ATGMs as well. So you're basically on par with the Mi-28NM. However, just because the fact that you can dodge these missiles doesn't mean that you're invincible to everything. Please remember that you are still vulnerable to beam-riding missiles like Vickers and Natakas, TV-guided munitions, laser-guided munitions, radar-guided munitions, and most importantly, player-guided munitions. This is really funny because playing against other helicopters either becomes extremely easy or extremely awkward, because if it's an Mi-28NM, depending on its munitions, he really can't get you, but you can't really get him either. But at the same time, he can get you and you can get him as well. Now let's get on with the final verdicts. At the end, ladies and gentlemen, is this helicopter really worth it? In my honest opinion, absolutely yes. I have to say, the fun factor of this helicopter is just very much amazing. There are some ridiculous challenges such as countering the anti-airs that are going to constantly shaft you, but at the end you can shaft the enemy ground vehicles back as well. On surface, it may not offer a lot of options as most of the armaments are basically the same, and the Apache itself, aesthetically at least, is basically the same as well. But remember, the devil is in the details. The new ammunitions alongside a much more promising infrared countermeasure makes it enough for me to play it and enjoy it. Seriously, I hate that useless disco light, I swear to God. Hopefully we will see more variants of this helicopter on other nations in the future as well. With that being said, ladies and gentlemen, special thanks to my friend Reaper for helping me out on testing the IRCM block on this thing, and at the end, special thanks to our channel members, super thanks donators, and our viewers for supporting my channel all the way through. If you're interested in the competitor of the AH-64 made by South Africa, feel free to click here. Or if you want to watch one of the worst and ugliest helicopters in this game, click on this video, or click whatever YouTube wants to recommend you. At the end, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your support, and thank you for watching.
Riding the storm with the desert tree, echoes of legends again.